Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program airing on Mondays at 3:30 p.m. on KSQD Santa Cruz. In today's program, we're discussing the housing situation in Santa Cruz and in particular the Riverfront Project, which was approved on January 12, 2021. To discuss this project, I'm joined here by Gillian Greensite and Ed Porter, who oppose the excess height and the shortfall in affordable housing. Gillian Greensite has been actively involved in environmental and social justice issues for the past 40 years. She worked at UCSC for 30 years as founding director of UCSC Rape Prevention Education. Ed Porter is a former city council member from 2000 through 2008. He's a retired computer teacher at Santa Cruz High School, serving the education system from 1980 through 2015. Welcome, Gillian, and welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much, Mathilde.
Thank you, Mathilde.
We really appreciate your inviting us down here, Mathilde. And this subject we want to talk about, this riverfront planned development, is this big building that will go right on the river, sort of halfway between Soquel Avenue and Laurel Street on front. This huge building is going to be 85 feet tall. Can you believe it? It was a surprise to most people who found out about it after it had been approved. That's why we want to talk about it a little bit, because it's a little scary to find out that there's about 12 more similar buildings planned that are about this tall or taller. We think people ought to notice, and maybe they might want to say something.
Gillian, how did you get involved with the Front Street River Plan?
Well, I went to all the meetings, particularly the Planning Commission meetings, where they were discussing what they called the downtown plan, which basically was carving out areas of downtown to quite drastically increase the heights of permitted buildings. You might remember after the earthquake, when half of downtown was flattened, a group of 19 very diverse people got together, environmentalists, business people, and they worked successfully to come up with a vision. In fact, they were called Vision Santa Cruz, to come up with how the new downtown would look. And in 1991, they presented their downtown recovery plan. To quote from it, they wanted the new downtown to be of human scale, 2 to 3 stories in height, and the buildings should maintain the scale and character of downtown. Now, they did allow that there might be 1 or 2 buildings that, for good reasons, might be taller. But over the years, various staff and councils have been chipping away, and then in 2017, when I went to all of the meetings, was when the downtown plan amendments began in earnest. And basically, that's how we got to having 80 feet tall buildings, and at first it was going to be 70 feet against the river, but of course, as I'm sure Ed will share, that got morphed into 85 feet. So it was no surprise. However, it was infuriating to me to sit in meetings. There were a few of us who attended all the meetings. We were basically ignored, and we had to sit and listen to planning commissioners say things like, well, this continues the spirit of the downtown recovery, post-earthquake plan. I mean, that was like turning reality on its head, because it basically was destroying the spirit of the post-earthquake downtown plan for rebuilding Santa Cruz. Obviously, with a new planning director who is pro-growth, pro-development, and the commissioners in that time, and we end up with these buildings that are out of scale, not human scale, and questionable in what they're providing, certainly not affordable housing.
I found out about this a little later, not in the context of the new height limits. And, during that era, I guess it must have lasted about a year, when there was all this discussion at the Planning Commission about what should the building height be. And our city staff was coming in and saying, our building height needs to be a lot more. There was a process where new height limits were adopted, and they were almost double what they had been previously, and those height limits were adopted in the year 2018, which seems like yesterday because we've been taken up in these issues ever since then. Then what shocked me was this matter that came before the city council for this building we talked about. they said, well, yeah, 70 feet is very nice, but we want 85 feet. I was stunned. Why would we go through all this trouble and all this community discussion to choose a height that was quite a bit more? Before, I think it was either 35 or 40 feet, and now it's 70 feet. But, oh, by the way, developers want more than that, and we'll give it to them. I didn't understand that at all. I thought our community cares about these things, and we want to talk about them. After the city council approved this building on the river, 5 votes to 2, there was a lot of emails coming around, and chain of emails where 30 different people keep adding more each day, and it becomes very unwieldy. But the general sense was, we want to do something about this. And the only thing that was talked about was an appeal to the California Coastal Commission. Gillian and I were both involved in doing writing for what we wanted to present, and we didn't know what it was going to be like. I'm not sure I've even ever been to a Coastal Commission meeting before, but we planned for what we wanted to say. But when we got there, they give you 3 minutes, and then, this is the real kicker, if you weren't at all those meetings that Gillian talked about that she was at, you don't get to speak at all. And I was just amazed. And frankly, the deck was stacked. We got that short time that our friend Ron Pomerantz presented, and I think he was the only speaker on our side. And there was 4 speakers, one for the city, one for the developer, one for the city attorney, and one other person who had gone to every single meeting. 4 people that spoke in favor. Even though 2 commissioners spoke up immediately and said they sympathized with us, then they voted with a majority, 12-0. There was never any hope. And the only avenue for appeal was to what they call a motion to reconsider. And we could have just done the same thing again. In the work that I've done since then, I've found out amazing things about how this could happen. And I just want to say one more thing. In this approval was a stunning reversal of something that's long been city policy in the city of Santa Cruz. Way back in the year 1979, we adopted something called Measure O. It was a voter initiative and a charter amendment to require any development like this have 15% of the units be affordable for low and very low income people. In the meantime, there's been state legislation. We've got a statewide housing emergency, and we're going to allow density bonus for somebody that wants to build these units. Give them the opportunity to build twice as many. So that's why this building got so tall, because it's 175 units. But guess what? They don't have to follow our Measure O that's in our city charter and in our Santa Cruz Municipal Code, and they got approved for only 10% of the units being affordable. And this got me to a level of fury that I didn't think I could get to. This is a voter initiative, and we are a charter city. We're supposed to be able to make our own laws, and yet mischievous people in the state legislature have been whittling away at that, and it doesn't look like, unless we do something, that we're going to have the rights of a charter city much longer. I think the Constitution is being violated.
It's absolutely right. The state is where these laws are being passed, and local control over land use decisions is fast disappearing. Not just in Santa Cruz, but statewide. If the intent was to provide more affordable housing, the results are not doing that. What Ed was describing with the Front Riverfront project, the developer asks for all the bonuses and can go higher, significantly higher. In fact, if they extend downtown to the first roundabout south of Laurel, building heights could go from 45 to another 85 feet, all in that stretch because of these density bonuses from the state. And the extra units that the developer gets are not subject to our Measure O. The Front Riverfront had the 15% affordable units of its original size, but when it got the density bonus to have more units, they didn't count. So that's why it went down. I believe it was 11%, Ed, I may be wrong. 11%. So it's like a shell game, and you're not getting much more. It's not so much getting less, because if you kept it at the lower 143 units, we'd get 15% of those. But he was able to go to the 175 units, but still the same number, not percentage. So it's not achieving the goals if that's really what the state is thinking it's achieving. So what we need is focus at the state level. We have John Laird, so maybe at some point we should be talking about, what Mr. Laird might be doing.
You're talking about local control and how the state is changing that. Does it have anything to do with Senate Bill 35? Is that what you're talking about? Or is that even going further than...
It does have a lot to do with Senate Bill 35. I was just reading that this morning and getting ready to come over here. There's some shocking things in there. And actually, in a very general way, the people that are passing things like Senate Bill 35 and a whole family of other bills that are coming forward even as we speak. In fact, one in particular, Senate Bill 50, was defeated in January, and it's coming back again for further consideration. There's this sort of a tidal wave of legislation at the state that's disregarding the constitutional provision for charter cities to set their own land use policies and zoning, like what we're talking about, and just to say, oh, we have this emergency, it's a statewide emergency, so this is the law now. And frankly, it has not been decided at the Supreme Court whether that's true or not, or whether that's correct, and I think perhaps someday it should be. But there's a provision in SB 35 that you mentioned that says cities must take the law that the state legislature passed and incorporate it into their own municipal codes. And then a most peculiar phrase, it says, but if they don't, they have to obey this anyway. And I think it's pure chutzpah. And I think just these people are very proud of their positions in the state legislature, and one in particular that I consider to be a political enemy of charter cities all over the state is Scott Wiener in San Francisco, who seems to be getting massive political donations from these real estate people and developers. And so the gravy train is not going to stop anytime soon for him. But we have that mysteriously in our own municipal code now, that somehow got into the municipal code on the last day of the 2016 city council, just hours before the new city council was to be seated. That language appeared in our city municipal code.
If I listen to you carefully and say it a little crash, do you feel that the city somehow got conned when it almost doubled its building height limit in 2018, and why?
Well, I do. And, I see Gillian shaking her head, but I think that they said, oh, we need the 70 feet height. After that, immediately, the very first one on the river on Front Street needs to be 85 feet and not 70 feet. Well, why wouldn't we say, when we're working on our height limit and our general plan, why wouldn't we say, oh, well, it needs to be 85 feet, let's consider that. But no, we accepted going from 40 feet to 70 feet, and then we got asked for 85 feet, and then the city council approved that. So I feel conned personally. Maybe it wasn't a legal con where anybody goes to jail, but I feel conned.
Oh, the public, I think, let's say they're being kept in the dark. When we tried to get some support for the building we're talking about on the river levee, and the Sierra Club put in a lengthy critique of the environmental impact report, there was very few people were interested, and I think it was because it was downtown. A lot of people thought that's the appropriate place for high density, and it wasn't in their neighborhoods. But every single person on that planning commission was gung-ho for the heights, and while the river was 70, on the other side of Front Street, it was 80, and they were very enthusiastic about that. And when we got up to speak, we'd bring up the original plan for 2 to 3 stories downtown. That was the vision. The rejoinder from the planning commissioners, particularly member Mark Masiti-Miller, saying, well, the Palomar is 93 feet. So you take a historic, iconic building and then use that as your yardstick, and everything else seems smaller. So there was great enthusiasm. But if people are really thinking that, well, it's downtown, it's not going to bother me, I think people who live in single-family neighborhoods should be better aware that the new legislation that just narrowly lost, Scott Wiener's legislation, will end single-family zoned neighborhoods. And there's huge enthusiasm for doing that. So I think it beholds all of us. I wouldn't say we were conned. I think staff are into this development. The past planning commission was. I think there's a little bit more debate going in that body now. I don't see a lot on the council majority of being more critical or saying, well, we've got to get involved at the state level and stand up for our town and what people want. People have bought this mythology that there's a housing crisis. We don't have a housing crisis. We have a housing cost crisis. And all of this rezoning and market rate housing is demonstrably making that worse, not better.
Before we go on to that very important topic of market rate housing, I would like to remind our audience that they are listening to Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD 90.7 FM. The topic is the Riverfront Project, or as some call it, the Wall in Santa Cruz. My guests are Gillian Greensite and Ed Porter, who oppose the excess height and the shortfall in affordable housing. So Gillian, you already segued into the next topic, which is the market rate housing. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Well, most of the big developments, the vast majority, in fact, 15 from 100 is 85. 85% of the units in any large development is going to be market rate. And the rest are supposedly to be, quote, affordable. But that affordable, our city neatly added a middle level affordable. They're called inclusionary units, and they were supposed to be included in a development, but at a below market rate. Well, when you add a middle level, there's nobody who's at a low income job who could afford one of these units, even the affordable ones, if it is 80% of the area medium income on which all these categories are based. Well, every time you build new market rate housing, and you can look it up online, the rents going for 555 Pacific for a tiny square footage is $2,700 a month. There are others that are, in the $3,000 to $4,000 range for a one-bedroom unit. As people come in from outside to buy or rent these expensive units, they raise our area medium income, which means it all rises for all of those income categories, so that the lowest, very low income person now, it's going to be out-of-pocket price for that person. So our cooks, our baristas, they're not going to be able to afford any of these units, probably not even the affordable ones. And I'll end with this. I've been asking our city for years to do a bit of research. All right, we have 1010 Pacific. That was higher. That was the highest building downtown for a while, except for the Palomar. And that was allowed because it had more than 15% below market rate or inclusionary units. Well, nobody has gone and seen, well, did this give housing for the Holy Triumvirate, as I called it at the time, because they kept pushing it, our teachers, our firefighters, and our police. That was who this was going to be for. Before. Well, I do know people who have lived in there, and they said it's full of students. Who's living in 555 Pacific? What about the one out on the west side? But that had more than 15% inclusionary units. Who's living in there? Is it mostly students? And if we're not providing housing for the people who are here, who are below or lower income, then we're kidding ourselves. All we're doing is creating the artificial value of a bit of dirt higher. And it might be bringing in people who can afford it, but it ain't doing anything for people who are in need in Santa Cruz.
And I assume you're talking about people who actually do most of the labor or the work that is needed to sustain a city. I hear you say it's not for people who really should live here because they work here. And they might be going elsewhere, Watsonville, Casterville, or whatever. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's two classes in there. I think police, firefighters make more money than the people who are cooks or clean hotel rooms. And they definitely, the latter, are being displaced and forced further out. And that's not just, my opinion. There's good research to show that that is happening all over. And it's not Watsonville, because Watsonville is gentrifying. It's further beyond. When progressive type people talk about, we need this dense housing so people can live where they work and bike to work and they don't have to drive and it cuts down on vehicle miles travelled, the research is showing that that's not accurate. That actually when you build these high rises and people come in, and they're coming in from outside, mostly, I'm not saying, 100%. The people who are coming in don't live here now, but they have consumption habits that create the need for more low-income workers, the people who chop the food in their restaurants and cook the food and so on. And those people can't afford to live here anymore. So we're creating this sort of massive problem that we think we're solving something, but we're actually creating a far worse problem. And if we had a bit of research to show, what has happened so far? Are we providing for people who work here now? No, but the rhetoric, the jargon is full of equity and all the words that sound good, but I don't think on the ground that is shown to be accurate.
What do people think in Santa Cruz? Have you discussed this with groups of people? Are you doing any research? What's going on?
We do talk about this, and I just want to pick up where Gillian left off, because the fact is that if you've got new units that rent for $3,500 a month, $4,000 a month, that doesn't fit the profile, say, of a teacher coming to Santa Cruz to be employed for the first time at 20 hours a week, who makes maybe $2,000 a month. That young person is not going to be able to afford a $4,000 a month rent or a $4,000 a month payment if she or he is fortunate enough to purchase. So who are the people who are going to purchase these units in this 85-foot tall building? They're either going to be investors from Silicon Valley who want to see this wonderful appreciation apply to their money, and they'll sell after a few years at even higher prices, or they're going to be people who make the bigger paychecks from Silicon Valley who want to commute over here. And either way, it's a big problem for us, because if that turns into 175 new commuters who drive the commute back and forth between here and Silicon Valley, we do not meet our objectives of reducing our carbon footprint. It's not sustainable. So it's a big problem to gentrify our housing the way we're doing it, and we need to do something about it.
What do you foresee what's next for Santa Cruz?
Well, I think that depends on whether the community gets more involved in these issues and whether they hold their elected officials accountable. Because I think if you just take a laid-back attitude and, whatever will happen, it will happen. And if we just keep electing city council members, or the majority, who is fine, some of their campaign literature was, we need housing for all income levels. Well, we don't. We don't. Some of these high-priced buildings, projects, are still trying to sell and rent. They're not filled. And so it's not a question of supply and demand. So the future will, again, be on how we get involved, but we have to be able to interact at the state level, because that's where the action is. Some communities, their local planning departments and councils are pushing back, and they're not sort of aiding and abetting what's happening from the state. It seems that our planning department seems to be quite happy with it. And I won't just give an opinion, I'll give an example, and a short one, that recently our city staff applied for a grant to extend the downtown zoning all the way down to the first roundabout, which the heights there are 45 feet, 35 and 45. Well, that would mean bringing 85 feet heights all the way down to that level, and all the buildings that would accompany it, and the change in how the town will feel, look, and the cost of the town. Now, they didn't have to do that. If the staff was concerned to see what's happening in Santa Cruz with the riverfront project as one example. We haven't even talked about the environmental impacts of that. Staff would not be leading the charge to rezone for higher density. I've said this before. I think that some of that problem is because some of our senior staff don't live in the city. Some of them are very new. I don't think they've got that sort of feeling and sense of place that comes from living in the town for a long time. They like the new, the high-rise, the San Jose vibe. Abbott Square is popular with a lot of people. I find it a soulless place myself. So you could say, well, it's just a matter of taste. And then I don't think there's much argument if it were just a matter of taste. But it is actually going to make this town far less affordable. In a way, when Ed says people commuting over the hill, I think we're facing people will be living here and working from here, so the commutes are not going to sort of be in the way of that. And besides the university pressure that wants to go 50% more, Silicon Valley and the new sort of elite, high-tech, well-endowed financially buyers, the future of Santa Cruz will be very different from what it is today. A class shift of major proportions.
Wow. Ed, we have just a minute left. Final word for you?
Well, I was thinking about why we have sister cities and what does it mean that we partner with those cities and go visit them to see what they're like. And I went and looked at the Italian city. Sesterce comes to mind. I'm not sure the whole name of the city, but it's a coastal town just like Santa Cruz with a south-facing, beautiful ocean area. What a magnificent city it is, and all the buildings reminds me of Santa Barbara a little bit, with red roofs and the glow of the light, and all the buildings kind of seem to average about 4 stories or so, and they don't have any 90-foot buildings stuffed into that part of the city. They do have in other cities. But we need to learn about what sense of place is so that when our children come back to town after being away at school for 10 years, they're going to recognize this place. Because if it looks like Silicon Valley, then it's not going to be what Santa Cruz has been traditionally. And there's some reason to preserve tradition, and we can build housing and preserve tradition too.
Some people accuse us of being nostalgic. I've been here for 45 years and we just want to go back to how Santa Cruz was when we first arrived. Well, that's nonsense. I mean, we're not stupid. You can't go back. What we're trying to do is preserve what is left of Santa Cruz right now. Starting right now with what is here now that is still of human scale and affordable and gives a sense of place that is unique.
That is a good thought to end this program. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Gillian, for shedding some light on building in Santa Cruz, and in particular, the Riverfront Project. And thank you to our listeners. Our next program will be in 2 weeks at KSQD Santa Cruz.